Beta-carotene is essentially, it's two retinols bound together. But the importance of keeping beta-carotene in the beta-carotene form is it can play a role in a lot of different fertility functions and needing that nutrient mainly for like local conversion within the different tissues that it needs. And so that local conversion of vitamin A within that organ is really important. And you can't essentially get there without having that local conversion within the tissue.
Hello, welcome back to the Dairy Podcast Show. My name's Barry Bradford from Michigan State University. Today, I'm happy to welcome two guests, both who work with a company called DSM, Dan Knoll and Dr. Erin Schwandt. Dan and Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I have some history at Kansas State, and I know both of you do too, but if you can give me just a little bit of your background, Dan, how did you end up in this role? Maybe throw in some Wildcat trivia there, and just tell us a little bit about where you're coming from.
Yeah, Barry. So thanks a lot for having us on today. So my history is I went to Kansas State University and graduated in 1992 in December, and was actually had Dr. John Shirley as my advisor. And kind of if you want a little history about something that was kind of funny is I always thought Ed Call was funny because he said that the guy that invented the round baler should be shot because he thought it really hurt the product and how hay worked. So I found that interesting on him and stuff.
Oh, I thought he was going to say it made rural young men weaker or something.
Well, too, because I actually ran a hay hauling service in high school and stuff. But then I went to Hutchinson Community College and then K-State. Got in the feed business after that and have had several roles mainly in commercial feed. But a year and a half ago, I moved to work with DSM as the South and West area manager for ruminants, dairy, and beef, and it's been working real well. So
South and West, so it's just a few states, or what do you?
14 states. I go Kansas to Texas, and then if you take New Mexico, the Canadian border, and west, that's all my territory. So
they're relatively large states as well. So.
Yes, it's large geography. So
very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Erin, what's your story?
Yeah, so thanks for having us. I am currently the ruminant technical manager with DSM Firmenich. We got a name change recently. I live in Northeast Kansas. I'm actually only about 20 minutes from Manhattan, and that is actually where I did all my degrees. And so my background, I did my bachelor's in animal science, and then my master's in feed science, and then my PhD in ruminant nutrition. So after school, I guess I did a short postdoc in the College of Vet Med at K-State, and then I worked at a small regional mineral company doing in-house nutrition. Prior to that, or after that, I joined Biomin as ruminant technical manager, and then DSM purchased Biomin. And so I moved into the same role covering supporting North America for dairy and beef. So
also a pretty big geography.
Yes, very large.
Whole continent.
Yeah.
Dairy cattle health is constantly threatened by the exposure of mycotoxins in feed. The monitoring of fungal toxins has become indispensable in the feed industry and in animal production. DSM Firmenich offers a range of analytical services to assess the mycotoxin contamination and solutions to combat mycotoxins. Learn more at dsm.com/ANH-NA.
For those in the audience who maybe aren't familiar with DSM, and I guess the new name now, can you give us just a little bit of background on the company, where's it based, this kind of scale and all that?
Erin, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, sure. So DSM's primarily our headquarters is in Switzerland. And so we are a global company. We have 9 manufacturing facilities of vitamins across the globe. Within North America, we have 4 different premix facilities in the vitamin space. We're divided by vitamins and then performance solutions, which is a different kind of a product offering category. And so we work across species. We have the animal health and nutrition, which is divided by swine, poultry, ruminant, and aqua. And then we also have a pet division, as well as under our human health and nutrition. So very large organization. And then most recently with the DSM Firmenich acquisition, that's kind of more on the human side and in beauty and well-being and perfumery. So yeah, kind of a big scope there.
Sounds good. I always think of course, this is going back before some of the recent acquisitions, but when I think of vitamins for livestock, DSM's always a company that comes to mind. So that's a good thing to talk about today. And the main topic we wanted to cover is beta-carotene. So I thought maybe we could just start with a refresher for people who haven't thought about that particular molecule for many, many years, perhaps. What is beta-carotene? Why do we have to think about it?
Yeah, so beta-carotene, kind of in a simple, kind of what most people think about is plant pigments is what it brings, is kind of that natural pigment. And so if you think about, a lot of people think about carrots, but also the green pigments in grasses. And so plants that are rich in beta-carotene are going to have, that real rich green color. So beta-carotene is a fat-soluble vitamin. And as we know, sensitivities of vitamins to breakdown, it is one that, can get broken down over time. So it's one thing we think about with stored forages and some of the different sources, they may have higher or lower levels of beta-carotene. So that's something that we kind of think about as far as how much is available to the animal within the diet and what is actually circulating in the animal, which is kind of cool. We're able to test through blood serum. We can evaluate those beta-carotene status of the animal.
Okay, so, simplistically, when I teach students, how we supplement ruminants, typically we talk about, okay, we supplement vitamins A, D, and E. The other vitamins we don't really have to supplement. How does this fit in? You're telling me now beta-carotene should be on this list.
Yeah, so beta-carotene is essentially 2 retinols, which would be our vitamin A. It's actually, the important thing is thinking about feeding beta-carotene in the beta-carotene form or having it available. It's one that we don't really talk about much because we are able to supplement our vitamin A. We do know that that's very important for the animal in a lot of different functions, but mainly a lot of repro questions come into play when you start talking about vitamins. So beta-carotene is essentially, it's 2 retinols bound together. But the importance of keeping beta-carotene in the beta-carotene form is it can play a role in a lot of different fertility functions and needing that nutrient mainly for like local conversion within the different tissues that it needs. And so that local conversion of vitamin A within that organ is really important. And you can't essentially get there without having that local conversion within the tissue, if that makes sense.
Okay. And just to kind of think about, whether we get enough of this through diets that we're feeding, is it crudely true that if you're feeding, say, hay that is, no longer bright green, is that essentially giving you an indication that things like beta-carotene have degraded over time?
Yeah, so one thing we do know, just on the stability and storage effects, as like, for example, for different silages, as it's exposed to oxygen and light and temperature and some of those things, it can oxidize the vitamins that are within that feed source. And so over time, we typically can see up to 60% loss of that vitamin within or throughout that storage period. So it's something that we definitely want to keep in mind as far as we can test, but then we can also, formulate, differences based off of what those animals need and what feeds we have available.
Okay. So Dan, if you go to a dairy farm or a beef operation and you want to talk about beta-carotene, like how do you start the conversation? How would you assess if this herd might benefit from some additional beta carotene in the diet, for example?
Well, one of the things I do is I talk to the dairymen. We'll talk dairy here, and then I can bring up a little bit of beef that I've done recently as well. But we'll talk about what they're doing in their close-up pen and kind of where they're at, kind of and on how they're doing on first service conception, a little bit on what their colostrum quality looks like if they're testing the Brix level and what the quality is like. And then we'll discuss what beta carotene can do, because most close-up diets, or even all dry cow diets, when you look at it, you're not bringing in green chop and feeding there. You're not feeding real green forages. You're feeding some really straw or lesser quality feeds to keep those cows from getting over conditioned during that dry time. And so we're not feeding any beta carotene during that time. And so they're driving that down. So we'll talk about, a little bit about how the, diet looks, how performance is. And then we'll say, hey, let's do some blood work and see where the beta carotene level is. Where we really want to be is 3.2 nanograms per milliliter in the blood. And a lot of times if I test a close-up pen, they'll be running at 1 or less, so because they've just been, during the lactation, they've used that, the beta carotene storage that they had due to oxidative stress, and the stress times will really use up your beta carotene vitamins just in trying to stay healthy. And so we'll look at that. And the neat thing about beta carotene is it will go into the colostrum and give a very high quality colostrum to those calves and give them a great start. If people are selling their colostrum, that's another thing to look at to get better quality in that. So we talk about that aspect as well. So, and then once we've tested, the other thing I'll do is, once they've been on a beta carotene for that time frame, and what we try to do in the close-up pen is get 20 grams of beta carotene in that animal in that 21 days, or if they need to feed the whole dry period, we'll do that through the whole dry period. It just needs to be in there. Since it's a fat-soluble vitamin, it will absorb into the reproductive tissues, in through the mammary gland, into the colostrum and things like that. So that's kind of how we go about it. And then we test later to make sure we have improved the levels to get them.
So if you're only feeding it close up, you're talking like a gram per cow per day, roughly.
Yes, pretty much. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that is of the active beta carotene. So, you got to look at the concentration of the product you're feeding. So
you said in there that you test close-up cows. Walk me through that. Are you bleeding every cow on a huge farm, and then how do you actually get the analysis done?
Basically, what we do is we'll lock up when they feed, they'll lock up those close-up cows, and then we'll do 10% up to 15 head in a group. So we don't need to do every one. We just need to get a decent number. So 10% in the herd, and most of the time I'll do 15. Sometimes I've done up to 20 if it's a really good sized operation and stuff. We've done up to 20, but most of the time up to 15 at 10% will get you a nice number to go out and give a nice average of what the group is. And it's kind of interesting, you'll see some that are pretty good, and you'll see some that are really, really low, and but the average generally comes in right.
Okay. And then you take blood samples? Are you sending these to a state diagnostic lab, or how do you get that done?
You can do that. We actually have an iCheck machine that I'll carry with me, and I can run those samples right there on farm, and we can have results. It takes a little bit of time to do, but you get through that, and by the time the day is done, we'll know what those cows averaged and can determine if it's something they want to look at to do to and improve. And one thing beta carotene does is, just as a a performance response is you'll see cows come quicker to estrus. That beta carotene gets into the egg and the follicle, so you see stronger eggs, stronger heats, quicker to estrus, and less early embryonic mortality. So you'll see more first service conception rate because of that.
Are those reproductive responses coming exclusively from supplementing in the dry period, and then you're done supplementing after that?
Because since it's a fat soluble vitamin and it does get into the fat cells, we get enough in to improve that reproductive performance. We don't necessarily need to feed it on through lactation. And forages that are harvested and they're fairly fresh, they'll have a lot higher level of beta carotene in them, like corn silage or a green chop per se. It's kind of interesting. I was in Arizona and tested a guy, and he had been feeding green chop, and he had a cow, and we just tested his early lactation pin. So he had a cow that had just calved, and so we tested her, and her level was 1.2, and so she had green chop a few days, and it probably brought it up from where she was at calving. Had one that was 30 days in the pen, and hers was 4.7 nanograms per milliliter, well over where you needed to be. So I like to say that beta carotene is actually like feeding green chop out of a bag, because you're getting your lush nature and that green forage in a vitamin supplementation that will work in the same manner.
That's fascinating. I wonder, I've thought about before that there may be some other micronutrients that we don't even really understand that also may be available in fresh forages that we need to keep digging into.
Sure. And there definitely, when I grew up on a dairy, and we'd had them run out on, it was a small dairy at the time. And so we had like 50 head, and we'd let them go out and graze triticale or rye. And it always seemed like our reproduction performance was way better during those times than it was in other times of the year when you didn't have that available.
Let's just take the 20 grams number. If you're going to implement that into a dry cow feeding strategy, what's the cost per transition cow then?
So I look at this as more of a reproductive therapy program, and on that 20 grams with using the program we do, it's close to $10 a cow to that program. So.
And then I know a lot of producers that I work with would instantly be asking, well, can I cut back on vitamin A then? At least in the close-up cows, if you're feeding that. What's your answer there?
Well, preferably not, because if you're short on vitamin A, the beta carotene will break down and be utilized as vitamin A. So 1 milligram of vitamin A or of beta carotene will actually be like 500 IUs of vitamin A. But the thing is, you really don't want to do that. And it's one of the biggest misnomers out here. I can't tell you how many times I've brought up beta carotene to somebody and they tell me, we don't need that because we feed plenty of vitamin A. Well, it's actually not the case. You got to make sure you have plenty of vitamin A and then feed your beta carotene levels in that close-up diet to do that. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
I don't want to get in the weeds too much, but I have to scratch my super nerd itch a little bit. So do we, like at a molecular level, do we have a good explanation for, like, you're basically saying beta carotene has unique impacts on animal function over and above what vitamin A can do, correct?
Yes.
Like, do we know why or what the mechanisms are there?
Erin brought it up a little bit, and I can let her explain it probably a little better than I can. But the beta carotene, it will actually get into the egg and into the follicle, and then it breaks down, and that conversion and that vitamin A inside the cell is what they need.
Okay,
and
vitamin A can't move in. Okay,
yeah.
I see.
So it's that conversion of getting the beta carotene in and the breaking down and that vitamin A that's made in that conversion time increases the reproductive performance by doing that. Did I cover it okay, Erin, or you got anything?
No, and the only other thing I would mention too is the beta-carotene particle size is really important as far as mimicking natural beta-carotene, and so that allows it to really penetrate the follicle. And so I think the key thing to really think about is keeping beta-carotene in the beta-carotene form within the targeted tissue that's needed. So whether it's the follicle, the ovaries in general are, have high concentrations of beta-carotene. And even if you were to open that animal up, the corpus luteum would be a yellow color due to beta-carotene concentration. So the importance of making sure that you have adequate levels for all the different functions within the follicle is very important. And so, yes, like Dan said, that local conversion. So that way you have that antioxidant that's available and that conversion happening within the follicle itself. So, yep.
It's interesting. So this is kind of a broader question, but I talk with people sometimes about how nutrition can influence reproduction, but it's kind of interesting from a what's the right word? Like you're engaging different groups of people typically on the farm advisory team when you're talking about nutrition in transition cows than you are when you're talking about reproduction. So how does that work in terms of having these conversations?
Well, that's interesting because, generally with the dairies I've been successful with, I've talked to the nutritionist and the owner of the dairy, the one the manager that makes the decision. And they are looking at helping their reproductive performance and how can we do that. One herd that I talked to, he called me, and his first calf heifers, he was having a dickens of a time getting them to breed. And when we talked about cost, we talked about things. He says, "Man, that's awful expensive." And my response was, "How expensive it is to breed that first calf heifer 4 times? That's a lot more expensive." So if we can improve that, it makes that program work well. And, the nutritionists, they look at it on a level of, is this something we need? Can this really improve that performance? And, once you get past that, that's a feed and it's more of a reproductive ingredient to help drive that, it really has helped. So
have you had, are there any really, you kind of just gave one example there, but have you had any sort of jaw-dropping responses on any farms that you can share?
Well, don't know about that, but I got an interesting story for you. We have a customer that started on the product, and his reproductive performance increased, and his colostrum quality, which was a big thing he was looking at, really improved, and he was really excited about it. And then he says, "Hey, this stuff quit working." Well, we'd been taking inventory of the product we took, and their micro machine, the motor had stopped. And so they stopped feeding it for about 6 weeks, and they saw a definite dip in the product. And I was just out there 2 weeks ago, and we did a recheck on the bloods, and they were all back up to normal. And he said things were improving again. So it, as a bad story, that's interesting because it also turned around to be a good story because you go, okay, we showed that we did make a difference. And so I really like that.
That's the optimal blinded study, right? And nobody knew it was coming.
Yeah, I was like, when the rep called me up that I was working with on that, I go, well, that's no good, but it could be good. We'll see. Yeah, but as on other stuff, we've just been out and guys have been feeding it and they've been getting great results, and so I don't have any other really crazy stories like that one though.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, you had asked about beef. I did a beef study, or a beef guy here just this last Monday, and it was fun to go see. And we're going to test when he gets ready, when he's getting ready to bring them in 60 days prior to calving. and see where his levels are at, because he just brought him off grass and was doing a repro. He was ultrasounding and finding out how far along they were. So we pulled some bloods out of cows that were on grass, cows that were dry lotted, and different areas on grass. And with the drought, this guy's in Iowa, and with the drought there, you even on green grass, it was interesting to see the differences from pasture to pasture where those cows were on beta carotene, because you would think being on grass all summer they would have a really nice level, and the one was off the charts, a little over 5, and then the next one was about 2.5, and there was one that was right on about 3.2, and then the cows that were dry lotted, they were under 1. They were a 0.59 and a 0.79. So that dry lot feed and what they had didn't have a whole lot of green in it, and we started, because they had 2 different groups on dry lot. One had a different feed that had some beta carotene levels in it, and you could definitely see the difference. They were close to adequate, but not quite. And the ones that were on the other forage, they weren't even close. So that
tracks pretty well.
To see how the feed makes that much difference as well, where they're at and time of year. And so I find that to be very interesting.
I've got a couple like bigger picture questions for you guys. You have sort of unique roles in that you get around a lot of geographies, and you're presumably on quite a few commercial farms. I'll ask both of you this. Dan, if you had to look in your crystal ball the next 5 years in the dairy industry on farms, what do you think is kind of the biggest thing that you're going to see change?
Well, I think we're going to see just more driving to some larger dairies, but also you're going to just as the nutrition increases and how people can analyze that, you'll see more higher performance. And the higher these cows are performing, the more important it is for us to make sure we've got our vitamin levels right, our trace levels right, and things like that. Because the higher performing of the cow is, the more they're in need of those nutrients. And so I see, as we've, growing up on a dairy several years ago to today, and I took a year out of college and actually was our herdsman on our dairy. And so I look at where we were then on nutrition and where we were on nutrition when I got out of school in 92 versus where we are today. And it is amazing, the supplements we're bringing in, the type of additives, which I find amazing. In one of my roles in a previous company, my job was to look at ingredients that might be coming and then take it to the management team and us see if we could implement those into a feed for beef cows in that company or dairy cows, and how that can actually improve their production. And it is just crazy to see how many additives are able to increase that reproductive performance, and not just reproduction but production. And I'm just amazed at how high the cows are producing today. But I think the sky's the limit as long as we have our nutrients right. People are feeding well. I think you're going to see more of these dairies going to robotic milkers to kind of help with that consistency on milking. And then it's just managing the cows and making sure you get them bred and everything. And I think you'll see a lot of that as well. Yep.
Makes sense. What about you, Erin? Kind of same picture, or do you see something a little different?
Yeah, no, Dan made some really good points, and I definitely agree. I would say also maybe going down the line of maybe having some more data analytics available. So in minds of thinking, maybe more preventative nutrition is kind of what I like to look at, as far as, what are the things that we can do prior to those animals getting sick, or supporting their immune system, supporting all the, their genetic potential of, how we're breeding them and how we're feeding them. And so, I think that there's definitely could be some doors opening as far as, some of those measures or biomarkers that we could be looking at to kind of help make some decisions, or putting things in place a little bit earlier. So that way we're hopefully, supporting a healthier animal and keeping cows in the herd a little bit longer and, all that. So.
Yep. Makes sense. A lot of cool stuff to dig into there, for sure.
Yeah.
When it comes to raising healthy animals, you need more than the right solutions. You need the right partner who brings decades of industry expertise and a global team to put that knowledge to work for the advancement of your operation. At Phibro Animal Health Corporation, we are proud to work with you as your trusted partner.
It's time for our famous 3.
R-Yeast 40 is a natural biotechnology from ICC designed to boost the health and productivity of animals under challenging production systems. R-Yeast 40 performance is supported by an unique processing technology that results in a pure product containing high levels of beta-glucans, MOS, and yeast metabolites. These factors, combined, promote the ruminal and intestinal modulation, helping the animals to reach their full potential.
All right, well, we've got these 3 questions we ask everybody. I'm going to split them up among you guys. We'll dig into your psyche a little bit here. So, okay, Erin, I'll ask you this one. What's your favorite dairy-related book or resource? And I'll try to pretend you didn't, waste your time on beef stuff in grad school.
Yes, no, I did spend a lot of time on beef, but I would say probably some of the biggest resources as I'm learning more on the dairy side and application. I'd say Journal of Dairy Science. There's been quite a few good publications that come out, and usually there's something covered on just about any topic that, I'm wanting to learn a little bit more on. So I would say that that's an excellent resource, as well as NASM. Obviously, there's the new recommendations and an excellent resource, as we're looking into nutrition side of things and levels and all sorts. So those would be my 2 things that I go to often. So
makes sense. All right, Dan, a little broader one here. What's your favorite book or resource outside of ag?
Well, mine's kind of funny because a friend of mine told me about a book called Living with a Seal. And it was about this guy that ran marathons, and he wanted to train. And there's this guy that he met that ran marathons, and this guy was an ultra marathon guy. He'd run 100 miles in the mega marathon deals, and he was an ex-Navy SEAL. So he invited him to come and help him train. And the book is amazing, and it's all about work ethic and training and making sure you keep your mind on what you can do. And, he made him do all these push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups. And he walked by the guy's room. He was in there and he did 2,500 push-ups that day. And he was just a nutty deal. But, it just makes you know that when you set your mind to something, you can really do it. And it's a great motivational book, and I really like it.
Okay, I'll have to remember that one.
Yeah.
For a second, I was wondering if you were going to go to the aquatic mammal or the elite special forces people. So.
Well, the elite special forces guy, I don't know. He's a lot tougher than me, that's for sure. Even though back in the day I did a lot of hay bales and stuff, now that I'm in sales, I'm not near as stout as I was way back in the day. So,
not sure if I've done 2,500 push-ups in my life, but okay, Erin, last question for you. In your opinion, what sets successful dairy professionals apart from those who are less successful?
I would say work ethic, positive attitude, and integrity.
Okay, sounds like a pretty foolproof approach there. Go with that. Well, Dan and Erin, I've enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much.
Yes. Thanks for having us.
It's been a good refresher for me on beta-carotene. I think it's, I want to go back and dig into some more of the research now. It's an interesting topic.
Mm-hmm. Well, fantastic.
So this has been another episode of the Dairy Podcast Show. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that button before you leave, and we'll see you next time.